Chapter 2. Clashing with Dominance. God dominates the universe, he also rules the church's foundation, just as leaders who have dominion over others. However, religion ought not to be amplified above God or the universe. Having dominion gives you the control to guide and rule over an empire, group, or nation as a head authority figure. Governing priorities and making decisions will impact the common interest of the relationship. Building a strong team, forming mutual agreements, granting and limiting access, planning goals, while taking care of responsibilities, etc. The lion dominates in the jungle, just as leaders do in business, career status, communications, corporate, government, job title, home, politically, relational, socially, etc. The leader guides and governs with superiority, exerting authority and influence while making compromising deals and ruling over others, granting and limiting access. At any expense, the person feels more important than others in a higher status. When domination is acquired by aggression, it doesn't necessarily mean you have the proper contract or documentation to dominate as an authority. If this is the case, it may be done in violation of business laws, which can lead to clashes with involved parties. Clash shows a conflict or opposition, especially of interest or views that can result in a battle, fight, or skirmish, in which the clash can appear offensive to the eye. Most conflicts today surround authoritarian parents, class status, corporate ladder status, foreign and U.S. agreements, foreign and U.S. affairs, illegal business, hemisphere icons, marital gender, money laundering, politics, religion, sexual assaults, sub-racism, terrorist attacks, workplace disputes, etc. Practically every area of a person's life surrounds domination. Every day people often take dominance to another level. When they pretend to have dominion over those considered a subordinate, the word dominate has lost its meaning. Although the goal is not to escalate confrontations, lawlessness rules on any class status, making it difficult to establish common grounds. Paul wrote in 2 Timothy 3:1-5, "This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of themselves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce-breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, from such turn away." A true foundation. The Church is characterized as the predominant foundation and house of God that provides moral guidance and spiritual intellect with natural affection. One is to apply themselves to devotion and the word of the Bible while keeping all commandments to distinguish false and true discernment. From this union, one is capable of controlling one's estate, making deals and peace agreements to help build up the foundation, so one is capable of handling current affairs and matters. One inherits the ability to think wisely and review all sides of a story before making a decision, in which you don't lean on your understanding of self-righteousness. Although certain people, such as children, the disabled, handicapped, and the elderly, are exempt from handling their responsibilities, it isn't wise to take advantage of them. The difference between God's wisdom and worldly wisdom: God's wisdom has biblical meanings, and the world's wisdom has all other meanings. Dominion over a foundation consists of territorial control over domains, empires, governments, lands, and nations within, in which any are subject to control, rules, sovereignty, or complete domination. It forms mutual agreements and loyalty. Domination consists of arbitrary control over a group, individual, relationship affair of matters, or individual control. It doesn't necessarily form mutual agreements or loyalty. Subordinate consists of belonging to a lower order or rank. Secondary, dependent, and subject to the superior authority, which can be a person or thing. Under dominion, as a subordinate submission is commanded, and under domination, the submission may not be expected or required. While the dominion control operates off subordinates keeping mutual agreements and loyalty, the domination control can be exerted by everyday people who may or may not have an agenda, and mutual agreements may or may not be of concern. Dominating with natural affection. Maybe natural affection has lost its vibe, but let's just be clear, dominant status doesn't mean you get there to have malicious intent. You acquire a higher status through education, hard work, and determination. Afterward, you create a strong foundation for family and friends. Dominating with mutual agreements and loyalty means having a righteous conversation and handling financial obligations responsibly. Avoid serving two masters in the flesh, to form long-term mutual agreements and loyalty with involving parties, in which you value the relationships because they have sentimental value, and do it gracefully and humbly. Egalitarianism, belief in the equality of all people, especially in economic, political, and social life. Mutual agreement. A mutual agreement is something shared by two or more parties. A mutual agreement or contract binds two or more entities, in which each party agrees to take or not take certain actions. The terms of the agreement are to be acceptable to both or all parties. A mutual agreement often involves monetary compensation in modern law. A reasonable person would agree that both of these circumstances constitute mutual agreements, but another reasonable person might not agree that there was a mutual agreement if no specific amount of compensation was set. This is a critical component in enforcement. Parties in the relationship express actions, concerns, and principles, and form consequences that the other will face once either party's trust has been betrayed. All parties are to be in support of peaceful agreements. Elements of a contract. Negotiation between the parties to each provides something of acceptable value. An agreement, either oral or written, and sometimes referred to as an offer and acceptance. Performance. Both parties agree to do something, or either can take legal action to enforce the agreement if the other fails to perform. The terms of the agreement can't be illegal. Legal age and sound mind. All parties to a contract must be capable of agreement and able to perform as promised, and minors can't enter into contracts with their parents or a parent present. Both parties must be of legal age and sound mind. A mutual agreement relationship isn't legal or binding upon the parties unless all these factors exist. Enforcement of a mutual agreement. Mutual agreement forms a basis for contract enforcement because both parties believe they're entering into a bona fide exchange. Either can, therefore, take the matter to civil court for enforcement if the other party doesn't perform as agreed. But enforcement additionally requires that a reasonable person would presume an arrangement is a mutual contract under the given circumstances, and this is the standard a court uses. Violation of a mutual agreement. Remedies. Two common remedies exist for violation or breach of a mutual contract. A court can order monetary damages from the party who failed to perform, in which the party must compensate the other party financially, or the court can order the violating party to perform as they said they would under the terms of the contract. Verbal agreements can be enforced just as written agreements can, but it is easier to enforce a written agreement. The agreed-upon terms are outlined in black and white and are not open to he said, she said interpretation. Loyalty. Under the quality or state of being loyal, faithfulness to commitments or obligations. Faithful enough to adhere to the cause, government, leader, sovereign, etc. The basis or groundwork of anything, such as the lower division. What does it mean to prove loyalty? To demonstrate faithfulness to commitments or obligations made. Why do people take loyalty for granted? Most people want to appear diverse and liberal to earn self-gratification rewards when trusting the ungodly. However, Jesus/Allah doesn't force you to earn self-gratification rewards for your trusted faith. All he asks is to believe in him while being obedient to his commands. Loyalty supporting diversity. Nowadays, many people support diversity but aren't loyal enough to be diverse. As the world becomes more aggressive towards ourselves and others, we lack sentimental thoughts. Almost every product created with false or misleading expressions is factored into rendering huge profits. America represents a variety of cultures. Others must see your loyalty to prove your diversity. When subordinates have been victimized by dominant people, the clash of domination hardly ever gets reconciled, and all too often, lawlessness rules over righteousness. Once you factor in the false and misleading concepts, reconciliation gets replaced with revenge. Although people deal with confusion and doubt in various ways, not all will respond in the same manner. God and loved ones are to come first, but as you see, most people are pretending to have a righteous significant approach in their daily affairs. Those top priorities get overlooked once revenge consumes their life. But criminal and spiritual warfare is why the world relies heavily on religions that handle warfare gracefully and responsibly, unlike cults, which would rather go against biblical and sanity concerns when taking matters into their own hands. We all have a reason to feel dominant, maybe to appear less defenseless, fearful, or weak. And sure, those are reasons so many people feel justified in supporting lawlessness. Dignity and hope with loyalty ought not to be repeatedly devoured by evil spirits' control. Proving loyalty is a part of believing in God. It shows you can be his faithful servant. Proving loyalty to loved ones means you will guide them through criminal and spiritual warfare of any kind. Bonds with family and friends are expected to be proven daily or weekly, but a friend can become an enemy in a matter of seconds. It sometimes takes years to forgive an enemy, and unrequired communication often hinders long-term truce. Neither helps repair bonds between you and an enemy, while the animosity grows stronger. Only forgiveness, love, joy, and mercy do. Leader warfare. It appears a lot of people are facing spiritual warfare. Although many leaders do righteous good works, too often, the negative things they do outweigh the positives. The spiritual warfare leaders face and have faced for quite some time means some are convoluted in areas others aren't. When leaders experience spiritual warfare, it affects them through various levels of emotions like anger, doubt, envy, fear, rage, strife, and often revenge, just as it does others. Essential warfare list of leaders. 1. Affairs of matters. Many leaders support going to war in various countries, which makes other countries hate ours. This usually leads to loyalty, mutual peace, and trade agreement issues, etc. 2. Donation of resources. Many leaders donate or help in local communities where kids suffer the most. Some leaders often try to be a parent to some of those kids when they probably should focus on leading a firm foundation. 3. Fraud investments. Many leaders invest money in Ponzi schemes, only to later find out they have been ripped off. This may prevent them from paying bills on time. 4. Greed. Many leaders form greed in various areas of their lives. They may defraud the system while spending excessively, cheat on a spouse outside the marriage, or sexually assault someone while on the job. When family and friends are affected, it can create chaos, and this, too, can create problems on the job. 5. High prices. Many leaders support raising taxes while valuing higher salary raises. Salary raises affect inflation, and it creates a huge conflict of interest when determining the sole basis for raising taxes. 6. Hindrance. Many leaders help create laws that hinder the poor from getting ahead. Some poor people may break laws and ordinances that lead to more entanglements, such as less freedom, loss of assistance, businesses, education, and employment, etc. If the poor can't manage their finances righteously, they will commit crimes that can endanger humanity and increase debt. This means our country has become less forgiving when it ought to work toward getting out of debt to be financially stable. 7. Kickbacks. Many leaders accept kickbacks on a normal basis, often to reverse dirty deeds. This can distort their reputation, revealing a traitor. 8. Lack of support. Many leaders often are taken advantage of when their employees extort money from the business. This can make the company lose or need government support. Also, this can make the company owe a debt to the government that has to be paid back within a certain time frame, or other penalties may apply. Lawlessness. Serving too many masters. In business and relationships without dominion, evil spirits often dominate, vainly serving the devil's flesh, and as you see, they will go out of their way to avoid forming a relationship with the involved parties. Since the actions won't be justifiable by righteousness, the evil spirits need elaborate battlegrounds to complete their assignments, and this is when businesses are targeted and used. Usually, when a person dominates, they have a master who sets up battlegrounds that will be used to carry out maliciousness. They also have to give them a report of their criminal activities. Otherwise, evil spirits commit their crimes out in the open space. And sure, they often force subordinates into signing illegal documents, pretending to have dominion over a foundation where they force demands and have rules and regulations, all of which is nothing more than acts of lawlessness, and if confronted, there will be clashes of disagreement. Not only do the subordinates serve the dominant person, but they also serve his master, all while serving God. Jesus said, "No man can serve two masters," Matthew 6:24. This means you don't review one side of a story to fit your plans of becoming successful. False discernment leads to financial losses and taking kickbacks, pretending there was an agreement. Conclusion and summary. When a person owns a foundation, they operate with dominion over it and dominate immensely. When everyday people dominate, if the person doesn't have a relationship involving parties or form a binding contract, the domination is formed without loyalty or mutual agreements. Without a relationship and a binding contract, the person who dominates cannot form or keep peaceful agreements. Either way, as a subordinate, being under domination, there will be demands, but the person would benefit more by being under dominion since they are expected to keep mutual agreements and loyalty with submission. Before the year 2000, people were more tolerant of mutual agreements and loyalty to avoid the consequences of betraying the other party's guidance and trust. Nowadays, you can't be sure a person is for equality or self. There are fewer common grounds, with higher demands that are unbearable to live by. Too many people are dominating, ruling over others' affairs with force, and no peace agreements of any kind. However, you must be able to distinguish between real danger and empty threats to form mutual agreements and loyalty. All this is criminal and spiritual warfare that needs to be addressed by people for equality, not just self-preservation. Otherwise, nations will rise and clash continuously. Some leaders live a life full of abundance, and God hardly ever gets the glory of the wealth. They, too, fear nothing, and when the unjust leaders fear no one, others suffer for the choices they make. It is time to reprove the wrong and make it right on both sides of the parties, to forgive. Jesus said in a parable in Luke 18:1-8 that men ought always to pray and not faint, saying there was in a city a judge, and there was a widow in that city, and she came unto him, saying, Avenge me of my adversary. And he would not for a while, but afterward, he said within himself, Though I fear not God nor regard man, yet because this widow troubleth me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me. And the Lord said, Hear what the unjust judge saith. And shall not God avenge his elect, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear long with them? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Parenting types. For teens who grow up without either parent, the abandonment can permanently alter the structure of the brain, and those who grow up with one parent are more likely to develop emotional distress. This kind of abandonment often formalizes into aggression, lack of empathy, or resentment. Whereas they may resent a parent and exhibit feelings of lack of concern about debt, school, further education, or even work obligations, in which they may overlook those events and times with some form of exaggeration. Even though it isn't acceptable or productive to be outwardly angry, aggressive anger can make teens more susceptible to dominating with foolish intent or being easily influenced by foolishness. Afterward, they may become a rebellious teen who are against authority figures, elders, parents, or police. Okay, this shows signs of bad behavior. The excessive things teens do often get perceived as positive when they were negative or vice versa. The teen who lacks a father, mother, or both will need supportive people in their life to overcome challenges. Moving forward, if you were raised without a father, you may want to control your anger and aggressive behavior. If you were raised without a mother, you may want to control the anger, aggressive, delinquent, hyperactive, and rebellious behavior. Or, if you were raised without either parent, you may want to control all negative behavior. Once you have experienced and learned from any trial test story, remember to give God the glory as your testimony. Authoritative parents. They govern their kids and home life according to obedience, political and religious principles, and even subjection. Whether at home or work, they act on those authoritative concepts by exercising complete control over the will of others, with absolute favoritism of obedience and submission to one's authority as opposed to individuality. They often are oppressive and strict with an attitude toward subordinates. An authoritative parent is considered a superego, controlling a weak ego that is unable to cope or identify with strong impulses. If an authoritative parent isn't submissive, they can become an ungrateful person to live with, when they don't and won't submit to God. Sometimes, it may not appear accurate and fair when parents dominate and rule their child's future because they want to live vicariously through them. The individual sabotage for a child may result in a lack of empathy and no willpower. Due to the aggressive tendencies they experience from an adult, exaggeration may also be commonly expressed with insignificant concerns or even power trips. We don't need to pretend the biological parental status hasn't lost its vibe. You can see this immensely in the rise of teens being adopted. Once an authoritarian parent isn't a submissive person, they pass lawlessness down to their kids. This teaches them to avoid submitting to others because they ought to submit to you first. Or don't submit to others, make others submit to you. Sure, this type of rebellion hinders kids' growth going into adulthood. To keep a job or long-term housing, you need to be able to make mutual agreements and prove loyalty to the boss to keep the communication open. So, parents avoid favoring authoritative concepts without being submissive to God, and you must be submissive for others to value submitting to you. Grooming for sex parents also acts upon authoritative concepts and principles, with absolute favoritism toward obedience and submission to one's authority. This kind of parent is unsubmissive to everyone other than the spouse. The parent stares intensely while bathing, dressing, and tending to a child as though they are preparing them for future random partners. They perform those repeated steps as part of a ritual and may sexually fondle, touch, or form molestation surrounding the child's life by molesting another child in front of them. They may even consume alcohol or drugs before or after to dehumanize. The parent will continuously dehumanize throughout the day by calling home while at work when the child is there. Also, the child may not be allowed to have close friends for fear of someone finding out and reporting them to the police. As a result, the parent may not even allow the child or children to leave the house for anything other than church or school. Okay, this shows signs of isolation, when a child or children isn't able to socialize with others their age. Grooming for sex predators. Predators get to know and watch their victims according to how vulnerable and weak they appear, and whether or not the child has been introduced to sex. Most predators groom the parents first by pretending to want to gain their trust. Although this is a start to the predator building sex barrier struggles around the child's life, all too often, the child or parents are unaware of it. The predator draws the child in with persuasion through their emotional needs, such as affection, attention, food, gifts, housing, money, or even transportation to take on more roles. They then use other distractions, such as telling the child their parents don't care about them if he or she doesn't give them what they need or want. Or they may tell them their parents never wanted them anyway. Once the predator has already formed fewer needs for parental attention and the predator has established his or her roles, they then introduce secrecy as a barrier to distance the child from their parents. This may involve giving the child access to do things the parents would not approve of, such as alcohol and illegal drugs. They may even grant or limit the freedom that the predator now dictates. Predators of this type generally maintain control using those emotional needs, guilt, isolation, threats, or vulnerability. They may even distress victims themselves to prove their control, laying the blame on the parent or parents allowing such things to happen, or with continuous alterations or alternations in various areas of the child's life, to pretend nothing has happened and all is well. Grooming stages may last weeks or even years, depending on the timing of physical contact and whether or not the predators can avoid adult interruptions. Slave-driven parents also act upon authoritative concepts and principles, with absolute favoritism of obedience and submission to one's authority. The parent or parents are unsupportive to everyone, including the spouse. All too often, slave-driven parents are either authoritarian parents or grooming for sex parents, and sometimes both. The parent or parents do the demon stare while verbally cursing and physically beating a child or children. They may even use alcohol or drugs before or after the beatings. The main objective is to make a slave out of the child or children. Afterward, the child or children are given a long list of tasks to do. Submissive mothers who limit drugs and violence guide their kids fairly and responsibly. Non-submissive mothers who abuse their kids around sex and violence create slave-like developments and patterns with their kids. It teaches them to accept drugs, violence, and other forms of enslavement, as if anything righteous will ever come out of living to die for those items. This occurs in homes where fathers and mothers are present, or the mother is present, and the father isn't. But it is more common in homes where mothers are present, and fathers are not. A slave child is being taught they don't need to overcome trauma, while the bond child is being taught to overcome to reign victoriously. Anyone can be in bondage, but it is highly recommended that you allow the bond of God to separate you from the slavery bondage of desires and lusts of the world. Supportive parents also act upon authoritative concepts and principles, with absolute favoritism of obedience and submission to one's authority. A supportive parent provides comfortable housing, encouragement, financial support, further education, health supplies, love, proper guidance, and sympathy for their kids. They acknowledge teaching them to be a loving and kind person towards others. They maintain the RDAs for their child or children, which can stabilize their mental and physical growth to make them feel and look healthy. They acknowledge repeating those steps until each child reaches full development. Supportive parents are well informed about educational ideas, so they contribute support toward the children's educational activities while making sure they get a good quality of education and follow instructions in school. They teach the children what they are to know in the following grade, embrace the children's achievements and communication skills, and research educational topics for the current grade. A supportive parent buys books or takes the children to the local library to review and study educational, academics, athletic, classroom, or course of study work that includes homework for activities, requirements, development, materials, practice, projects, research, etc. Supportive parents acknowledge what a grateful person being means, so they show empathy, tell truths, and are compassionate toward others in times of need. They avoid being dogmatic toward their kids by admitting faults and avoiding being overly confident and opinionated for arrogance or greed. They acknowledge avoiding passing aggressive anger on to their kids, in which their kids face fears and overcome challenges by the grace of God. In any case, supportive parents act as a protective shield to keep evil spirits away from babies and children. They don't allow ancestral demons to control, influence, or instigate life with traditions that are disturbing, unfavorable, and unbearable to live by. They are very careful with whom they leave their children, such as babysitters, daycare centers, schools, etc. They watch for children in their care, and they never let them out of sight. Those things can enable them to value inner strength and be accountable for their actions with self-awareness. With supportive parents, the kids form effortless behavior, something you can't buy nor replace. They tend to set goals to remain focused and acknowledge giving God the glory. This kind of supportive parent is rare in our society, but no one is perfect, and we all have fallen from grace. Unsupportive parents also act upon authoritative concepts and principles, with absolute favoritism toward obedience and submission to one's authority. Either they are parents who have abandoned their kids and aren't supportive, or they are grooming for sex parents and aren't supportive, or they are slave-driven parents and aren't supportive but are demanding. Often, the grooming for sex parents are also slave-driven parents that carry both mentalities, and either way, they are unsubmissive towards anyone. For the most part, they don't support their kids in something that will get them ahead in life. They don't teach the kids anything that will benefit them, nor do they protect them from harm's way. They are the parent the teacher has to keep calling to ask, will they come to the parent and teacher conference? And generally, they are too drunk or high on dope to come. Some may work, but if they aren't working, they make excuses. In the family structure, there is unrequired communication, so no goals are accomplished, no achievements are required, and needs go unmet. But generally, most unsupportive parents are raised by unsupportive parents or people, children confused and abandoning paths. Too often, the evil spirits they associate with, the same semantics play out, and it is all about sex. Adults who have experienced grooming for sex patterns tend to use baiting through guilt tactics. A parent may use the child or children's sex to remain in a marriage or to keep a spouse. An adopted parent or step-parent may use the child or children's sex to get things needed around the house or to advance in life. Afterward, what tends to happen is the parent may sabotage if the child or children don't want to play along with the semantics, whereas the parent withholds allowances or advancements, and may even repeatedly judge them for circumstances where they had very little control, even if the parent's sabotage prevented a better outcome, whether they deny it or not. Grooming a child to be used for sex can bring stress upon them once they realize the sex barriers were aimed at targeting their sex. Most of the time, the parent, adopted parent, or step-parent wants to dominate the child or children's life. If either is the case, it isn't any better than grooming for a sex parent or a sex predator who lures children for sex. Any of those parent types can appear dogmatic and overbearing, believing sex justifies entitlements as a child. The child or children may abandon paths in life, believing that you become unfruitful in lands where such affliction takes place, and every decision is justified based upon sex barrier struggles. As a result, the adult or parent has formed a platform for evil spirits to destroy and ruin their life. These recurring events can make anyone feel defenseless, enslaved, vulnerable, and weak. Generally, most parents who have forced their child or children into abandoning paths don't want to be held accountable for their actions and will go out of their way to cover up by sugarcoating the semantics, in which they advocate being an adult of mystery or remaining in a childlike nature. But you cannot want things done your way without acknowledging respect, responsibility, and trust. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. Psalm 37:23, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, who are called according to his purpose. Romans 8:28, God will allow you to be fruitful in the lands of your afflictions. Genesis 41:52, all parenting types act upon authoritative concepts and principles, with absolute favoritism toward obedience and submission for one's authority. Each parenting type has things they value more than life itself. All any parent can do is do better and avoid passing bad behavior on to the kids. Sugarcoating the semantics of sex barriers. The ability to cover something devastating or difficult with sugar/words is for it to appear more acceptable or pleasant. This is sugarcoating bad news, and covering up anything can lead to lying. Parents will deny or sugarcoat the circumstances and events surrounding a child's upbringing, mostly when the child has been groomed for sex. You can see this immensely in the rise of mental illness, so we don't need to pretend it doesn't happen. It happens all too often. Either they say, "Oh, it didn't happen that way," or "Oh, you don't even know exactly what happened." This is twisting the child's experience and then giving your own. And most kids who have been molested start to wonder, whose side are you on? This, too, is a part of the semantics kids experience when they have been sexually violated. Is it wrong to sugarcoat harsh or traumatic experiences? According to Sunday school teachers, who are authoritative figures, you are to tell your story as it relates to the Bible to be fair and bare truths. In general, no one ought to twist your experience. This would be a second-hand and unfair experience, and not coming from the horse's mouth. So, to avoid sugarcoating bad news, give a fair and true analysis of any news. We people need to bear truths and face fears of bad news to not play along with the semantics. Hate in the world. Most hatred is formed through backstabbing, betrayal, deceit, envy, revenge, selfishness, slander, and even strife. All this means there are a lot of unforgiving people. More importantly, boundaries aren't established enough in areas you need them most, and too many boundaries are established in areas you need them less. It is a shame that people have been on the planet for over 400,000 years and still, evil hearts rule. The final assignment Jesus gave us as followers. Being in bondage to the evil spirit's influences has led fewer people to believe that a God can supply all needs. However, formally, socially, traditionally, and day by day, minute by minute, hour by hour, and second by second, forgiveness and righteousness conquer hate. God's eternal focus. God's eternal purpose is to make known his wisdom through the church, which is a temple. To make his wisdom known is to deliver it to the congregation. The temple exists in the hearts of the people who believe. Also, we pray and keep our hearts steadfast throughout trials. Paul set forth God's eternal purpose, Ephesians 3:9-11, and he gives two practical applications in Ephesians 3:12-13. Having eyes for the eternal means that you see things the way God sees them, and you don't get caught up in the worries of the world because the creator of the universe has the whole world in his hands. When we focus on eternal life, 2 Peter 3:13 says, "Nevertheless we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness." Jesus spent his last days baptizing, preaching, and teaching. He also healed the blind, the dead, the lame, and the sick. Although he was a forgiver of sin, the things he did helped form a great and mighty nation for a renewed foundation in the future, which will need modern science and religion. Too often, we undermine the value of the future's foundation and what it is supposed to bring. To undermine is to destroy by secret activity or stage underhand attacks to collapse or weaken a foundation. This often includes contradicting, hindering, underestimating, even destroying or falsifying legal documents for one's benefit. Whatever is hidden behind closed doors, such as drinking problems or sexual sin, all unrighteousness will come to light. The Holy Spirit manifests in the presence of people's lives to set them free from bondage. Certain mythical themes surround the New Testament. Once you know about them, it is wise to interpret the basic message God intended rather than stretching the truth for one's agenda or propaganda. According to the Bible, if you believe, know, and obey Him to reveal His promise in your life, it is virtuously moral and righteous, sufficient for building faith surrounding His knowledge. In 2 Peter 1:1-5 it says, "To them that have obtained like precious faith with us through the righteousness of God and our Savior Christ, grace and peace be multiplied unto you through the knowledge of God, and of Jesus our Lord, according to as His divine power hath given unto us all things that pertain unto life and godliness, through the knowledge of Him that hath called us to glory and virtue, whereby are given unto us exceeding great and precious promises, that by these ye might be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust, a spirit world full of laziness." Sure, the world has transformed into a world full of evil and lazy spirits, with many forms of justifications as the common denominator. Let's just be clear, you are only justified through God, and justifications don't cover sin. But the average person fears and regrets things from the past that hindered success, and appeared dogmatic from time to time, asserted arrogant and selfish opinions as truths, due to influence or instigation. We have all made false and misleading statements, trying to convince others we knew what we were talking about when we never researched topics of interest. We all have taken something that didn't belong to us, and we all have lied. We all have hated someone who was of an angelic or godly type. At one point in time, we have all hindered someone else's success with negative energy, and we all have appeared defenseless, vulnerable, and weak to other evil spirits. All this is many forms of negative energy that rub off on others, and although these are basic sins, the bigger sins will eventually be dealt with, but in the meantime, we are to forgive our enemies. Laziness is when you are unwilling to use energy for whatever non-life-threatening reason. You are unlikely to do a task that you perceive as difficult, meaningless, or uncomfortable. Therefore, you may lie or refuse to complete the task because it doesn't affect you directly or indirectly. Or you may lie or refuse to complete the task because there is no instant gratification or reward. You don't want to appear lazy with an ego, so work to avoid defense mechanisms to be able to distinguish between real danger and empty threats. When you're incapable of completing tasks due to a physical or mental condition, you may not defend yourself because it is a natural feeling of despair or distress, in which you may be considered as unable to take care of yourself. Once you feel better, self-care to reach achievements and goals, do not remain in the same mindset until death. According to WebMD, self-care is the way to practice taking better care of yourself, which includes, get a hobby, limit screen time, get a message, listen to music, get lots of sleep, go outdoors, plan a getaway, keep a journal, reduce clutter, meditate, talk to someone, or be charitable. During these harsh economic times, people tend to think of starting a business as being incapable of achieving and hard work as slave-driven. When you estimate a low value on a return before it has been established, it is more than likely that the business or work obligations will never transpire. If you are a highly authoritative parent who doesn't support individuality, your kids will fail at keeping promises. Your child can't continually go through life minding things with self-doubt, or everything will fail. You must change those beliefs to change the way your child thinks. Jesus thought about future generations as a healer and saver, not as a ruiner. Back in the day, many people were able to visualize with their own eyes Jesus' value for hard work and determination. Particularly when Jesus healed the people at the pool of Bethesda, Sunday came, though it was a day of rest before the change. He still honored the need to heal people and save the lost. It was his life goal. He felt all this was a major requirement since they didn't have proper doctor care back then, and they relied solely on people who could naturally heal illnesses. Although he knew many righteous people had been killed for what they believed, he zealously kept going on his journeys. Ultimately, the crucifixion, doubters, or haters never modified his righteous good works personification to be able to give God glory in the end. Matthew 5:1-9, be inspired by Christ. Completing tasks. 1. Plan goals. 2. Accomplish those tasks. 3. Celebrate those accomplishments. 4. Plan more goals to accomplish and then celebrate those accomplishments too. Forgiveness and judgment. In this old world, most people perceive demonic dwellings as a death sentence that comes with a huge payoff. The money exchange that started back in the day continues to distort the next generation's belief system of the Bible, which often distorts common values through justifications. The worldly desires of money enable pervasive ideas and opinions about the way demons ought to be dealt with. It has become too common to misguide people who are weak to demonic dwellings and classify them as stupid or unstable, which is a form of judgment. Weaknesses are caused by fear and self-regret, and demonic dwellings are direct results of defiled flesh. The bulk of rich people's wealth has been surrounded by unrighteous deeds for quite some time, overruling the victim's affairs of matters dear to the heart. Back in the day, victims weren't allowed to even point out the error of judgment to exorcists or psychiatrists for fear of more casting out rituals being used upon them, and this still seems to be a major error in human judgment nowadays. Assuming one will ever be awakened under incarceration of the mind from highly medicated conditions to inform themselves, to create change. Being possessed by a certain entity gets its greatest support from regular, everyday people not believing they can overcome it. The fact is that demonic activity gets assigned too many battlegrounds through dominance and subordinate money laundering tactics, which can become annoyances. All this shows is that the world has become less forgiving of the innocent and more demanding of the evil spirits. This says sufferers are being victimized three ways by the demonic tricksters, supernatural analysts, and swindlers. It is wise to visualize demonic dwellings as a need for natural forms of purification and as a form of survival. The people who suffer need to adhere to natural affections formed through natural remedies to notice the difference between real danger and empty threats. A mind aligned with truth is more powerful than the harnessed energy of unconscious behavior. More people must be enabled to update new and old data stores in a fast amount of time at the conscious level to re-energize to live out their full potential, all to become a better nation. We are not helpless material objects, separated and waiting for an afterlife with limits on the quantities of energy due to evilness. We are a people with the ability to live an eternal life in the here and now, because God forgives, so we can learn to too. Our higher spiritual nature is connected to the true wellspring of energy and power. It is time to awaken souls to true spiritual empowerment. There are alternatives to exorcism, so just stop giving the evil spirits battlegrounds to form money laundering tactics. Direct the righteous anger towards further education, and don't give the evil spirits a place in your home. Also, be more forgiving of innocent people, and forgive evil spirits to let go of the wrong emotions. Most importantly, groom the children around for marriage to prevent them from being groomed for sex. Help the children learn to distinguish between real danger and empty threats from bullies in church, school, etc., all to avoid them becoming the spoil and prey. Again, it is up to us to change the cycles of abuse and vanity. As a Catholic ritual, exorcism is a practice used for casting out demons. The exorcist is often perceived as a Catholic and a person who has learned supernatural skills. An exorcist uses prayers and religious tools, amulets, formulas, gestures, icons, symbols, etc. The exorcist may call on Jesus, aka the Spirit of God, or angels and archangels to intervene throughout the exorcism. Exorcists believe the authority of exorcisms is given to them by the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Practitioners consider exorcism as a cure rather than a punishment, and people considered to be possessed are tied down if there is potential for violence. From a scientific view, some cases are considered people who are narcissists or suffering from low self-esteem and act demonically possessed to gain attention. Scholars described exorcism and mental illness as psychosurgery, aka neurosurgical, or psychotherapy, used to release demons from the brain. Negative side of exorcism. The guidelines on exorcisms were first published in 1614 and were revised in 1999. Warning: real-life exorcisms can result in fatality. Occult and New Age activity was out of control in Europe during 2004. However, official priest exorcists and exorcisms from around the world have increased rapidly since the guidelines were revised. Nowadays, exorcists' names aren't kept secret, and their contact info is open for search via the internet. The priest is performing at least 8 to 12 exorcisms every night, and yet there is no central database for exorcisms performed. The psychiatrists and priests who have worked with victims of demonic possession from around the world say that exorcism demands are escalating. Initially, a priest's main goal is to help afflicted people resume a relationship with God while on their spiritual journey. Various cases are demonic oppression, obsession, depression, and infestation behaviors where people suffering do insignificant things multiple times a day, even sin addictions, all of which are very distressing and painful. An exorcism takes 2 hours, the process takes a minimum of 6 months, and the priest may work with a person every month for 4 years. Signs of demonic possession include superhuman strength, aversion to holy water, or the ability to speak in unknown languages. Other potential signs of demonic possession include spitting, cursing, or excessive masturbation. Some claim supernatural strength when they are in a state of possession. A psychiatrist says that the mentally ill who believed they were under attack by evil spirits were mostly mistaken. But it is important not to confuse diabolical possession with psychiatric illnesses. Only 1% of individuals who claim demon attacks need an exorcist. Both Christians and non-Christians are asking to receive spiritual intervention, and the services include demonic attachment, infestation, vexation, or full possession. Attachment consists of a disembodied spirit of the dead human soul. Whether a Christian or not, exorcisms are done on people who strongly believe they will work. Many seeking help are desperate due to suffering for quite some time. They are telling priests that the paths of psychology and psychiatry are yielding fewer results. Though priests have access to psychologists and psychiatrists as a part of their discernment team, including a prayer team, all team members believe Satan exists. Priests are blaming everything from alcohol or drug use, pornography, telecommunications to interest in black magic, New Age practices, occults and Satanism, Ouija boards, tarot cards, voodoo, witchcraft phenomenon, to increasing demands in the number of exorcisms. Also, they blame popularity in paganism, the diminished authority of the church, and the emptiness is being replaced with addictive behavior. Although evilness is on the rise, religion is perceived as outdated and unbelievable. Occults practice of Ouija boards, tarot cards, or New Age practices that also cast spells, curses, or summon the dead. Through witches and warlocks, worshipping Satan and other demons, and most practices promote blasphemous thoughts. Many people believe demonization or satanic rituals are the result of an increase in the addiction phenomenon. The devil language also forms high energy. However, keeping up with exorcism demands is a constant struggle. I avoid talking about a devil or Satan as if it exists when most times these are enemies most people are referring to. In the last decade, books and films have increased about exorcism and supernatural powers in bookstores and online networks. The Old Testament says that when one grows in knowledge, one also grows in despair. With more talks of the devil and Satan, evilness, beliefs, faith, and values rapidly diminish. This leads to serious physical, psychological, and spiritual damage for youth with demon possession effects. Priests say that demonologists, exorcists, and psychiatrists ought to work together through religion and science for an interdisciplinary approach. Since Jesus' ministry is surrounded by several myths, some youths aren't interested in knowing more about him, but you can't be that self-righteous. You need help to be delivered from the bondage of warfare. A study performed at the University of Cambridge, conducted by David Llewellyn, examined vitamin D levels in 1,700 men and women from England, aged 65 and older. The results showed that subjects with the lowest in vitamin D3 performed poorest on a mental test compared to subjects with higher levels of vitamin D3. With more amounts of D3, you can't go wrong.